Send me something you've written if you're a writer, or send me something great you've read. And looking back, it blows me away. American Pie came out of that, and Final Destination came out of that. I was getting to meet with people that I believed in their talent, that I believed in them, and was just excited by what I read. Whether the stuff I was developing or cared about mattered to the market was sort of the next stage of all this.
We live in a complex and ever-changing world, a place that is maybe harder than ever to successfully navigate. The answer is surely to be brave, but it's also to seek and be open to guidance. Mentors are the one consistent through line in the lives of all accomplished people, myself included. So welcome to Mentor Buffet, a feast for those, like me, curious about who helped the most successful among us succeed. Chris Bender is the producer behind the American Pie movies, We're the Millers, and more recently, Mulan. He also produced my debut feature, Tracktown, and so many movies. 6 of them have turned into franchises, which is a really big deal for those of you who watch movies or don't. That's a very big deal, and I'm sure that's... I always wonder if you could have predicted that.
Oh, hell no.
That's awesome. There's a Chris Bender type of film that you have made, right? And I guess I wanted to ask you, like, what is that Chris Bender brand? Like, what was it that was drawing you? What was the hole in the universe that you started to fill, bringing these voices in without anybody holding your hand? What was that?
I stumbled into this job working for this literary manager producer, which at the time there's only a handful of people doing that. Now, we were just talking about this recently with my team. There's 200 plus management companies of different sizes. It's incredible, like, how much the management business has grown. And we were looking through the list. I think I knew a third of them, but all of them have some form of whether they're talent or literary or it's incredible that it's grown to that, because at the time it didn't really exist. There was the agency model. When I got to Hollywood or moved to LA, I didn't even know what agents really did. I didn't go that route, in part because I just wasn't sort of brought into that kind of system and said, oh, start in the mailroom, that whole thing. I had met an agent and I saw what he did. And I was like, that didn't really feel like me. So I wasn't sure about that. Development for a studio, it felt like I wasn't really qualified, so I didn't think I could get that job. So I was interviewing for all these sort of development jobs. I'd get to the end, the last 2 people, and I'd lose out to someone who worked at an agency. And I 10, 15, 20 jobs I didn't get before this guy, Warren, hired me to be his assistant. He had his own shop. He was on his own. His reputation was that he worked at an agency. They didn't promote him, so he started selling scripts out of the back of his car, showing up to parties and being like, I have this writer you should read, and giving scripts out. And so he hired me, I think, in part because I didn't have a traditional background, and he didn't consider himself traditional. But I probably showed in my interview that I was a hustler, because I was like, showing him articles. I was like, this could be a movie, that could be a movie. Wouldn't this be great? And so he hired me, and his whole thing was like, find the writers that are being ignored, who have really strong voices on the page, but don't have that sellable script yet that agencies need to pay attention to. And we'll develop those ideas. We'll develop the movies that will introduce them to the market, initiate their careers, and then if we really had a hand in the development, we'll produce it. And I asked him, I was like, well, how do you know how to produce? What do you do at that point? I don't know, figure that out. And so I was like, well, this guy's the perfect guy for me, because he knows about as much as I do about producing. Yeah. And at that point, he'd already sold a few scripts and was attached as a producer to certain things. And at that time in the early 90s, mid 90s, the feature spec market was booming. Like, the studios had tons of money and producing deals, and they were just hungry for development. So they were buying original ideas, original scripts that writers were writing. And so you had this robust market of writers writing scripts on spec and then selling them to studios, sometimes treatments, sometimes as pitches. And it was a very exciting time, a time that I'm kind of hoping is about to return because of what's happening in our industry, and a shift back maybe to movies and original movies, since the Disney remakes and the Marvel movies are slowing down. So there's going to be an opening, and it's going to have to be filled with original fare. So anyway, at that time, I just clicked with that idea of like, okay, find writers, develop something, go sell it.
And what about it? Like, because you said it, other jobs you interviewed for, other jobs you saw didn't feel very Chris-like, but this somehow like clicked for you. What about you was tickled?
That's a really good question. I feel like because my approach was like calling everyone I'd interned with and worked with up until that point and saying, send me something you've written if you're a writer, or send me something great you've read. And looking back, it blows me away, but like everything that came out of that, which wasn't a plan, ended up being the kind of basis for
the model,
my career. Like, like American Pie came out of that, and Final Destination came out of that. The guys who wrote Cats and Dogs, who are big writer directors, Glenn Fakar and John Requa, they're friends now, but they came out of that. Me calling someone at Fine Line, and they're like, they have this crazy script. I have this crazy script, Jack Tucker Trucker, you should read. We can't make it, but if you're just looking for a fun read, you should read it. And I read it and loved it. And what it tapped into was like, I was getting to meet with people that I believed in their talent, that I believed in them, and was just excited by what I read. And because I remember all those first, like Brian Lynch, and he wrote this incredible Muppet script, and Adam Hers, who wrote a Seinfeld script and a Larry Sanders script that made me laugh. So I was like, okay, this is a guy I want to work with and develop something with. And we came up with the American Pie idea. So it tapped into, I think, what I did as a kid, making movies with my brother, where we were just doing what we kind of loved, and it was fun. And it was really, we had total control over what we were doing. Whether the stuff I was developing or cared about mattered to the market was sort of the next stage of all this.
Right. And basically, like, your taste was guiding you, right? Because these scripts are speaking to you. And the fact that that your taste was ahead of its time, as it turned out, right? Because these projects that are successful, it means people do have a taste for it. They just haven't seen it yet, right?
Right.
But it's awesome that you find, it comes back to you, right? But you found a job at first that allowed you to like settle into the kind of bicycle that you were already thinking about in your head, which is like, what am I attracted to that I haven't seen? Or do you think everybody has taste?
You can tell when someone knows what they like by the way they talk about it. I was always frustrated with my ability to express myself. So I couldn't be an actor. I couldn't be a comedian. I couldn't be like someone who is in front of the camera. So I think what I was seeking was being able to express myself through other people who I believed in. So I think that's the connective tissue there for me. Because like when you ask what's a Chris Bender project, like that is...
It's your taste.
It's my taste, yeah. I have to connect with something in the story. There has to be something, like that's the thing that connects all the projects. There's something in there that I was like, okay, this is about family. Okay, this is about marriage. Okay, this is about adolescence. This is about... And I'm relating to it in a way where I can then be a good creative partner to the writer and the whole team, because I'm speaking to it from my truth, or trying to. I'm always telling these kids, I'm always like, those were, when they talk about like, was it scary when you started money and not making, not knowing where your career was going? I was like, that was the best time, because you have no responsibilities. My backup plan when we started Bender Spink, in my mind, which I actually think is a good thing to have, was ski bum. Like I was like, well, if this doesn't work out, I could be a ski bum. So there was no pressure. And so when JC and I started Bender Spink out of the house we were living in, we really had nothing to lose. We were making more money by selling one or two scripts than working anywhere else at that point. And so it was just a matter of, let's see how far we can take this. The kids, and I think this is true for a lot of kids maybe at some of these East Coast schools, like they're looking for the most brightly lit path to go down. And as a school, they're trying to figure out, like, how do we just let them know that there's other paths? They might not be as brightly lit. And so, and going back to something you said earlier, which was interesting to me about asking questions versus telling someone what to do, because for that kid, for some of the people I'm talking to, like, I'm very aware that, like, or if you're pursuing acting, like, you have to own all your decisions. Like, you shouldn't, you can't have somebody telling you, like, do this, this, and this. It's like, well, how are you feeling right now? What do you want to pursue? What's pulling you? Go in that direction. Make your own decisions, and then we'll talk. But not be told, and you have to be comfortable. You have to learn how to be comfortable, especially, like you mentioned, my older daughter, who's, like, at least now exploring acting. Like, failure is such a huge teacher as an actor, you know, in terms of what you consider success, or as a writer. You have to get very comfortable with, like, failure, learn, move on, failure, learn, move on. And what you're doing, of course, is growing. But so it's not, there's not sort of a go to school, do this track. There isn't a track. It's not a clean track. There's so much ownership over the career path you take. And that's one of the things you hear about most people in our industry, in the entertainment industry, is when you get a different story from everybody.
You really helped me when I needed to learn how to kind of be in this industry more independently. Like, I needed to learn how to write and manage projects and do things more on my own. And you shared with me about when you grew into, like, some of the wings that you and your partner were kind of leaning on each other for.
Yeah.
That was really helpful to me. Like, that was, you have to understand, like, that, like, I could cry because, like, that conversation, it was really scary to think about going into the arts as more of an individual. It was so scary because I knew that I was so good at what I was good at, and so untrained and undeveloped in certain ways. And you shared with me that you went through something where you had to grow these skills that you didn't have. And you just did it. Like, you just started doing, and that's how you did it. Like, you just started moving in that direction and taking on and playing the role that you hadn't played. And that, I think, is, I know that sounds so simple, but, like, people should understand that, like, if you can't do something, just try and start doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Don't think too much about how you're going to do it. Just start doing it, because you don't have to do it perfectly. You don't even have to do it well.
Right.
You just have to start doing it.
Every year I run the New York City Marathon. And when I go, I walk a lot. I will take the subway from my brother's apartment in Brooklyn into Manhattan, swing through the Met, get lunch at my favorite ramen spot, and then head to the expo to get my bib. And after the race, it's my tradition to go on a hike, even when I'm in the city. And this year I got to try out Merrell's new shoe, the SpeedArc Surge Boa. This is a light hiking shoe that I wore all the way around Central Park, and it was really easy for me to go from soft to hard surface as I walked to meet my cousin for brunch on the Lower East Side. And the Boa lacing system is way easier than normal laces, especially for adjusting mid-hike. You literally twist it, and then when you want to release it, it just pops off, and then it loosens, which is really helpful. The dual density foam midsole makes the SpeedArcs feel buoyant, which is one of my favorite words. And I love this matrix upper. It doesn't tear, which is really important. And basically, these shoes are cute. Like, I am going to wear them to my new movie premiere, and I literally got stopped on the streets in New York and at the Marathon Expo because people wanted to know, where did I get my shoes? I got them from Merrell, and you can too. Use code MentorBuffet25 for 25% off your first order at Merrell.com. Every morning, I wake up and walk my dog Bernini, and as soon as I get back, I make a latte with Peak's Sun Goddess Matcha. Matcha has been my comfort drink since I first discovered it in Flagstaff, Arizona, while I was at a snowy altitude training camp before qualifying for the Olympics. I love it. This matcha also helps with my skin. I get one pimple a year because I'm Greek, but Peak's Radiant Skin Duo helps my skin too. It's my go-to to nourish my skin and rebalance my body. It has L-theanine in it, which helps me focus on my writing in the morning without being scared of a caffeine crash. They also have these pre-measured sachets, which are great for travel. And I travel a lot. Last year, I went to Berlin, Greece, Italy, and the Olympics. And my skin is glowing. The other product in the Radiant Skin Duo is the BT Fountain Beauty Electrolyte, which hydrates on a cellular level with clinically proven ceramides to reduce fine lines and wrinkles. It's also vegan and has no added sugars or artificial ingredients, and that's very important to me. Ready to transform your routine? Right now, you can get 20% off on the Radiant Skin Duo, plus a free starter kit, including a rechargeable frother and glass beaker, with my exclusive link, peaklifecom/mentor buffet. That's PIQUE life.com/mentor buffet. Don't miss out. Glow naturally into 2025 while supplies last. Can you take me through some of the things that you learned from some of these specific film experiences?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, every movie is such a great teacher, because you're working with it's like you're joining a new company every time and working with new personalities and types, and you've got different challenges depending on the kind of movie you're making, and I there's just nothing like it, because you once you're greenlit and once you have your schedule and the starter pistol goes off, you have this set amount of time to complete this task, and knowing that there's like 100 things or 100 plus things or more that could go wrong before the end of it, but yet you're looking at it and saying like, we're going to do this, and you're all on the same team. And so one of the things I didn't know when I was younger, as a young producer, because I was a manager for a while and then shifted into producing and gave up management, was how much experienced producer brings to the table, like that the value of that, because the value of the experienced producer is the wisdom that comes with being on sets and being through the processes of independent and studio films, and what comes with that is a calmness that there's rarely a problem that comes up now, at least, that would put me into a full panic. Maybe stressed, but in some ways like more excited and be like, ooh, this is different from, the other problems, has similarities, but how are we going to fix this one? And, and I almost am projecting ahead to like when I'm telling the story about how we solved it, because I always feel like we're going to solve it, and at the same time, so many of the problems also require not just attacking and actually taking a beat, because one of the things I think a lot of producers would say is like, so many of the hundreds of problems that come up, if you wait an hour or maybe a night, they solve themselves. And it's incredible how often that actually happens. So in some ways, by trying to proactively solve something that feels chaotic and necessary to solve right away, a lot of times it's just like giving it a breath, giving it a moment.
The do nothing approach. I've learned that from one other. It was one of the guys that made This Is Us, and that was his advice too. And it was kind of like it was mind blowing, because you're so encouraged into action with chasing your dreams. Chasing your dreams is like an action, So the thought that you should just chill for a second. I mean, it's a good lesson for athletes too, because so often when we're injured, we just want to be able to do everything, or we want to know we're doing enough, when a lot of times you really have to let your nervous system come back. That was a lesson I learned late, because you always want to feel that you're taking action, I guess.
You also get an instinct for which problems need like an immediate to be immediately addressed, and which problems you can kind of sit back and just be like, all right, give this one a moment because the player's involved, and let's just see what happens. But anyway, that I guess my point was that when I was younger, I wasn't aware of that wisdom piece that producers bring to the movies they work on, and it's an important part of the ecosystem, and why things get made and can be made without controlled, why the controlled chaos happens. Like, because a well-produced movie in the end should almost look like, well, that went very smoothly. And, from the studio perspective or the financier perspective, not knowing that there was a lot of stuff happening, kind of levers being pulled behind the scenes.
Yeah. It's like you are becoming more and more of an encyclopedia, like the more and more you do things. And when we go back to that fear question, if the fear is really about like picking the wrong path or making the wrong choice or making mistakes, what you're saying is that the answer to that fear is that the path, the mistakes, the experience is your body of work. You are the encyclopedia, and that is your strength.
Yeah.
Is awesome. I mean, that is not, we are so results, we're so driven towards results and stability in objective ways. And I think about that even with Olympic athletes, because we're so specific, right? We're chasing this, like, it's almost like you're going down a very specific tunnel, and the fear is that it doesn't prepare you for anything else.
Yeah.
But if you think about yourself as a body of work, of wisdom, of a thing that dealt with change and adversity, then it's prepared for whatever, right? Because it dealt with it in this cellular way or whatever. And that feels like truly calming to me to think about it that way. And also the kind of joie de vivre about when you make a movie, problems are just going to happen. Like, you've seen it so much that it's part of the vocabulary of, it's part of the, like, the tool, it's part of the book of it, it's chapters of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've had, it seems like you carry it into the rest of your life too. You're just, that's life maybe.
Oh yeah. I would say that, having kids and, made me a better producer for sure. And I'm not even sure if vice versa. I think it's a one-way thing.
How?
Like
How? You have to tell me how.
Because you learn to deal with people and situations that are not rational at times. And when there's conflict, there's going to be moments of irrationality, and where you can't try to reason your way through things, where it has to be addressed emotionally, calmly, taking that pause, all those lessons you learn in dealing with a toddler or a teenager. And that directly correlates to a creative fight you might be having with the studio, or a debate you might be having with an actor, because if you with a kid, obviously you have to be the adult in the room. You have to be the one who's, I love my Instagram feed. I'm constantly getting like the parenting stuff and whatever. And I'm always, every once in a while, I'm like, that's a good one, and they're generally about like, do not argue back, do not argue back, just listen, acknowledge, and, have a conversation about it, and don't try to solve it right in that moment. And that lesson for parenting applies really well to producing, directing. I think anyone involved in the making of a movie. And you can tell, like, the people who have experience, whether it's the AD or the production designer or the DP, the experienced ones, like, there's almost like a coded, like, it's going to be okay. Like,
Yeah.
we all know what we're doing. We're all professionals. We've all done this for a long time. We're going to solve this problem. And if it requires a grind, we're going to all grind. If it requires sitting back, we're going to, and you just start to get a sixth sense for that. The reason JC and I were such great partners, this is the late, great JC Spink. He was the big personality, networking out there, whether we were meeting with, the legends of our industry, like, Bernie Brillstein, or, he had an encyclopedic memory of their careers, had read their books, just was able to walk into a room, know 100 people, was also like, I think it was Scott Stuber, who just left Netflix. We were talking about JC after he passed, and he mentioned that when he was the president of Universal, and he would look at his like endless phone sheet of all the calls he had to return. If JC were on there, like, at the bottom, he would call him first because he knew JC would have something funny to say. And it was such a great testament to one of JC's superpowers. And so because of that, I got to then just focus and spend my time like working with the writers and getting the scripts ready and, you know, really trotting through the process of getting movies made. And he could be the frontman and the salesman and the one setting things up. So I knew when we started Good Fear that I would have to take on more of that role. And that wasn't, I don't even know, it wasn't my natural strength. It wasn't the way I connect with people. Big, loud, and boisterous. And so, but I knew I had to kind of find my own way of doing that. I think that's still something I'm working on and you know, struggling with to a certain extent, but it's just something I'm still, like we were saying, like I'm okay with being a B. Like I'm never going to be an A+. I'm never going to be him. So
did you have some positive surprises, like growth that you might have not stepped into?
That's a good question. You know, nothing immediately jumps to mind. I hope so.
I mean, I'm sure it's just the,
you know, I think the industry's obviously changed and so much is, so the measure is different. But I definitely put myself out there more and, you know, started, you know, even doing something like this was something that I don't know if I would have done, you know, back then, or if I did, it would have been like, you know, I would have had JC as sort of the buffer.
Growth is not passive. You know, it's like we really have to step into it, and we can just we can either step into it and become like a bigger version of that, or we can just like shrink or something. Like I feel like there's not a neutral, when you're faced with a pivot like that, there's no neutral step. I don't feel like, I feel like you either grow or you shrink.
Yeah.
You can't really stay the same because there's like a missing piece. So it's like you either walk away from whatever it was that was complete before, or you fill it in somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep my podcast studio stocked with Orgain at all times. Sometimes I even slip it into my guests' espresso drinks without telling them, and they always want to know the secret ingredient. My big secret is that it's Orgain's organic plant protein powder, and that one serving packs in 21 grams of protein, which is like the same as eating 3.5 eggs. It's hard to get enough protein in a day, especially when I'm running a lot like I am these days, and Orgain has all 9 essential amino acids, and none of the things I always try to avoid, like soy, artificial sweeteners, and preservatives. I put some of Orgain's strawberry plant powder in my smoothie after my run this morning, and let's just say Hailey Bieber still tasted like Hailey Bieber. Orgain believes real nutrition has the power to make a real difference in people's lives, and so far it has in mine. Remember, there are no quick fixes when it comes to your health. If you want more protein, give Orgain organic plant protein powder a try. Head to Orgain.com/mentorbuffet and use code mentorbuffet for 30% off your order. That's the best offer you'll find, but you have to use my code mentorbuffet for 30% off. One last time, for 30% off, head to Orgain.com/mentorbuffet and use my code mentorbuffet.
No, I learned a lot. I mean, one of the things that came out of that was, you know, I did feel, I remember at JC's memorial, like just a lot of support from friends and industry and people who I'd kind of grown up with, who had connections with JC or with what our company once was, you know, or what it meant to them in those early years when we kind of were selling a lot of things and a part of something that was fun and exciting. So having that was an important part, including the people that came with me to Good Fear, like Jake Weiner, who you know, is my partner now, who we you know, lived through that JC era, good and bad. And so, you know, we'll always kind of have that connection. And I think he leaned on JC for the same things and had to work on the same things that I did, because he was more of a kind of writer connected development person as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool that you refer to the industry too, like the other people around, as supportive, because I feel like it doesn't have to be we don't have to have a scarcity mindset, even if we each have our own individual pursuits or voices. Like we can try and have an abundant mindset here. in the arts.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be lonely. I think, one of the things that's come out of the strike is like producers in general are talking. Like we all started talking more and helping each other more. And that's never happened, there's always been this sort of guise of competition that I don't think was now looking back at it, is as important as a community. And so there's now a community around producers that didn't exist in the same way that it does now.
Yeah, it feels very necessary too, because it's just information sharing too, right? Like that's mainly what you're talking about, is like it's such a it's important to share that information because it's weird. Things are changing so much.
So there's like, there's so much, and I think there's a tendency to want to kind of keep producers separate and not sharing information because of the way that the industry works. Producers might be the ones to set something up, put all the time into it, and then by the time it gets to green light, they're the most vulnerable. Yeah. And that tends to be when traditionally the studios then are able to cut your fees or leverage you in a way that you have no control, because they know how badly you want to get these things made.
Yeah. When I think about you and the way that your like taste is, it's so connected to you, but it's also realized through other people, right? And their art and their existence in the world. It's really cool because it means that you're someone who like must exist on a planet with other people.
Yeah.
Like that's like it's amazing because I don't know, sometimes it's easy to wake up and be like, the world is really hard and I'm against everybody, but if you are building like a life where your taste and your existence in the world is actually better and needs these other people to help bring to you what speaks to you, and you to them, right? That's like really cool to me. I'm not, I
think because I think about the projects where I didn't have that connection, and I was kind of dead inside as being, I felt fake being involved with, like, if I don't have that, it doesn't feel authentic. So, maybe I'm helping get it made, maybe I'm there, maybe I'm giving some feedback, but I'm not in it in the way that I am with the ones that I really care about or connect to. So it is, I know we had for me, a little bit of a breakthrough here for me about connecting it to that expression. I think it's become a way of me being able to express myself.
To realize your taste through...
My taste is my that's expression and connection with people. Because the other thing that was so fun about those early days was like when my taste started to become validated by, I'd send something and I was like, I think this is amazing and funny, and then send it around to the people I got to know, young people in the industry or agents. I mean, I had early sort of partners in crime that our tastes aligned, like Adriano Borghetti was a new agent at Endeavor, and we just connected so much over the material that we shared and the writers that we both advocated for. And Richard Brenner at New Line, who's still someone that is a close friend, still running New Line, and we just connected over the same kind of idea. There was like almost a shorthand. It was like if I thought something was great, he would see it in the same way. So we had a lot of early Just Friends and Butterfly Effect and Monster-in-Law, like a lot of early movies together.
Your taste as your expression is it's a lovely thing, because a lot of people do struggle with, like, let's say they thought they wanted to be an actor and then they become a manager or something like that. That doesn't have to be a loss of expression. It could be that their taste in other talent and they're fostering that in the world is their expression, and like there's just a million examples. Coaches, right? If you're a coach, it's always interesting, like when there's a coach who never played the sport, but they seem so deeply involved in the sport and they're so good at what they do. And it's like their taste as a coach. I mean, if they're whatever it is, that's we're just using this word, but it's their expression, right? It's if that's really what how they're able to be, I don't know what it is, like they're be in the world, right? And That's a cool way to think about it because, you know, like my brother worked for President Obama for a while, and I felt like he had some, like, he loved it. And then he was also challenged because he's like, what do I want to do? And I think everybody is always trying to figure out, he went to business school, he started his own company, you know, whatever. But people are always trying to figure out, how do I express? And to realize that there's a different, like, kind of ways to express. If you don't realize it, you might not realize you're already doing it, right?
Yeah, it's ties into the deepest wants, right, of our needs of being seen. So like, it's how your taste is how you're seen, if it's connecting with other people.
Do you want to be seen?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, who doesn't want to be seen?
I guess everyone, but I've never asked you that. What does it feel like to be seen?
I think it's probably the thing that connects us all as human beings, right? Because being seen and seeing someone else is human connection. That's like on the simplest, most fundamental level. And so, and working with artists, writers in particular, like every time they share a script, like, they're asking to be seen, hopefully, right? And if they've put themselves into it, and if you as the agent, manager, producer read it and see it, like, that's a connection that's goes beyond just like, oh, we can sell this, you know. It's on a deeper level, and it's the most exciting part, I think, when you creatively collaborate with people
that see each other.
Yeah,
that's really cool. If you're enjoying Mentor Buffet, follow Voicing Change for more inspirational and truly life-affirming content from shows like Soul Boom, The Proof, Feel Better, Live More, and the Rich Roll podcast. Just go to voicingchange.media. That's voicingchange.media for a beautiful selection of productive and positive shows.